So my screen is visible, huh?
If you can, you could turn your video on just so, because your video will be the one shown alongside the, like, because you're speaking, your video will be the one shown alongside the screen share.
Okay, just give me a minute. Huh? Swati stool de na blue. Oh, okay. So good evening, everyone. So today I will be presenting the paper, which you can see in the left side, titled "Exploring the Impact of Student Teaching Apprenticeships on Student Achievements and Mentor Teachers." So your apprenticeship basically mean mentorships only. So this is a very recent paper published in 2020 itself, and the data is of 2009-10 to 2014-15 academic years. So basically here what they are doing is the researchers try to explore the within teacher variations, like the mentors, who are the mentors, the variations within the mentors for the students of grade 4 to 8 in the subjects of math and reading, where they host the mentor to the students, and then they estimate the causal effect of these mentorships on the students achievement, both during the mentorship and even after the mentorship. So first I will start with the factors affecting achievements of the students. So first is the experience of the mentor, then the frequency of the mentor-mentee interaction, and the comfort level of mentee with the mentor. So these three, of course, vary from mentor to mentor and teacher and student to student. So this surely affects the achievement of the students. Then the next and a relatable thing in this paper was the covariates which they have considered. So these are the 6 covariates which we have considered. On the right screen, you can see that. So the first one here is the limited English. So as all the communication, this is a research done in the Washington state. So all the things were done in English only. So they saw to it that the students, how well the students speak English and understand it. So how much they understand English. So that was the first covariate. Then second was if they have any learning disability. So because that would affect the achievement from student to student. Then next was the economical condition of the students. This is they considered this by considering the student on the factor that they take free lunch or they don't take it. If they take free lunch, then they have rated him a bit down, and if they do not take, then then they have rated him a bit up in terms of economical condition. So here, I guess their success varies depending on the economical factor, because if they are able to afford the resources which the teachers provide them and sort of that thing, then they are native of which country or which region. Next is gender and race, so they are like more of self-explanatory part. Then the major content, here they have also taken care of some biases, like there might be biases like there might be sorting of students from the toppers batch to the average batch, like how we have in India in coaching classes, like they sort the students from the top batch, like they put up all the toppers in one batch and all the average students and below average students in another batch. So here there was no kind of sorting as such. uh, it was random, completely random, and the marks which were calculated are of the same assignment given to all the students. And then the marks were calculated, and based on that marks, they assumed the achievement done by the students due to that mentorship. So next thing was here in test scores. So one thing I wanted to say that they standardize the test scores by grade and year. Of course, we cannot compare a 8th grade student's marks and 4th grade student's marks. So what they did is they set them as dependent variables. That is the variables that are tested, the marks of the students, and the other all the variables they kept constant in the regression which they use. That is their model. Then the analytical approach they use. So they use the value added model, uh, which was explained in the last session by someone. Value added model, I think so. Josh or someone explained about the value added models. So here the objectives were different. So first objective was to describe how teacher effectiveness varies over time as a function of hosting a student teacher. Next was the causal impact of student teacher, like the mentor, on the student's test scores during the student teaching year and after the years also, and whether this impact differs based upon mentor teacher's own value added, like the experience of the teacher, whether she has hosted a mentee before this. All this was also considered here. So next, they have used a very structural wise procedure. So first, they initially started, they created these equations to calculate those performance of the students. So they did very structurally, like they started with a very basic formula and then kept on adding terms to that formula, new terms to that formula, which depend on the which affect the achievement of the student. So this is the first equation which they so this is the first equation here, YIJST. This was the first equation they started with. They did this to explore the changes in teachers' effectiveness over time. So here basically YIJST represents Y is the performance of student I under the mentorship of teacher J for the subject S and in the time period like the year T. So basically, it takes into account the performance. Here, YIT minus 1 is also given. So it takes into account the performance of the student in the year preceding that year. What was his performance in the preceding year? Because if his performance was bad, then we cannot expect a drastic rise in his performance. So even that is a factor which they considered here. Next year is the SIT. It's the all the covariates which I discussed about like the limited English and all those things. So they took up all those and put that into one single term, which is SIT, which is the covariate considered for student I in that time period. And next is Tau JST. So Tau JST is based is like the teacher's effectiveness and how the experience and the education of the teachers. So the Tau GST is written in the next line, which I have written in the next line. So here it's like whether the teacher has ever hosted the student before this mentorship program. So that's considered in the ever host variable. And then the how much education and how much experience she is there in this field of teaching, that they considered in the EXP term. And after considering these two equations, they plotted these four graphs. So the first two graphs are basically representing, first two graphs are plotted using the equation number 1, where they have not considered the experience of the teacher, but the next two graphs they have plotted using the prior education and experience of the teacher. So they basically are random and almost similar, but just there is a bit rise in the graph. So basically there is just a just a rise in the graph here, A versus C. If I compare A versus C, so it's basically there is no experience consideration. So it started off something here, but when I tried considering, then the graph was a bit higher on the y-axis. Similar for English also. The graph B and D shows that. Next is, and this was the final equation which they considered on the students' performance, IGST, which I told you about, where they considered all the factors. Here, the experience of the teacher, then the covariates, then the performance in the preceding year, everything was considered under that single equation. And then they calculated the students' performance based on that. So here are the results. So here in the table, we can see that they have used a statistics method, which is two-sided t-test. Two-sided because they assume that mentorship has a positive as well as a negative effect on the student, uh, because the student needs some time to get acquainted with all those new things which he is able to learn from the mentor. So that can also have a negative impact on the student. So they considered two-sided t-test, and then they calculated the p-value. So the lower the p-value, it means that more is the contribution of that factor to the overall performance of the student. So here during the year hosting student teacher, that is the in-year performance. So that it has a negative value, minus 0.018 and something of that sort. So negative means that it had a negative impact on the, they have averaged it. So it had a negative impact on the student during the teaching year, but gradually it came down, and it became positive after 4 5 years. So that says that the student needs some time to get acquainted with all those new things. So initially there can be a negative impact of mentorship. And the next is after hosting the student teacher, here basically the values are decreasing, the values are positive. That means after hosting a student teacher, there is surely a rise in his performance, and these values are decreasing, and as I told that p values, if they are less, then it has more contribution. So we can see that after 4 to 5 years of mentorship, he surely has a much higher level of performance boost as compared to the previous years. Same for same they have differentiated in math and for the English subject. And the major, this was about the table, and the other results or conclusion which they have drawn from the experiment is the comparisons between the years after the mentor teacher hosts the student versus the years prior to the student's teaching placement. They revealed modest positive effects in both maths and English. So that is after the hosting, there has been a positive effect. On the other hand, hosting student teachers requires substantial time and resource commitments by the mentor teachers, and this could also divert attention from the students and dissect them from their normal classroom practices, and this can also lead to a negative effect. And also hosting inexperienced and less knowledge student teachers, like it was random, so some students might have got an inexperienced mentor, so their performance boost might not be as great as a student who has got a very good teacher. So that was their main motive of considering this. Like there can be variations within the teacher also. And then they suggest that schools can also participate in such programs of mentors and mentees, so that it could have a long-term test score increase, and it adds value to and experience to the teachers also. So after hosting 1 year, after when the teacher hosts the next year, so surely the teacher has the 1 year experience of hosting mentees. So even that affects the students' achievement in a positive way. So that was all I wanted to say.
So I'm assuming you're at the end of it, right?
Yeah.
I have a couple of comments, but I'll wait for others to offer some feedback if you have any, either on the
So, like,
or
yeah, I just wanted to ask. So, in the paper, so did they discuss anything about the student motivation too? Like, because that is also another factor, like how student performs. Like only having a good mentor, like, does not indicate that the student will like definitely outperform the others,
Yeah,
right?
of
Just
course,
by not
that's
having good.
yeah,
Sorry.
that's the thing. But one thing they they haven't considered motivation directly, but one thing they have considered is that they have considered the performance of the student in the previous year. So of course, if he is motivated, then of course a performance would be well in the previous years also. I think so.
Not necessarily, right? You improve it year by year, right? It might not possible. It might be possible that the
Yeah,
performance like comparatively is worse, and which motivated him to improve next year, right? Compared to like having let's
yeah.
say good performance, which won't like basically give a lot of incremental like right output. I don't know like if that because if someone gets let's say low grade in like a particular year, then like he will work hard to get like basically offset that. So like eventually like the motivation would be higher in that case. Like
Yeah,
if you
but
see
they
like from
haven't.
an example.
I don't think so. They have considered that.
Okay. Um,
So
yeah.
yeah, I'll still pause for other comments. And if someone can summarize like the key takeaways, someone who's not Devang, to understand like how well you gathered what he said and what the paper is trying to convey.
So I can like just give a high level overview. Like these equations haven't like followed it. But I'll have to look it into like detail a bit. But the idea was like they were trying to see okay, like someone who is let's say an experienced mentor and someone who is an inexperienced mentor, but how the like students' performance keeps on improving like basically from let's say having an inexperienced mentor with years, because like the mentor also gets some experience like as it mentors like from year to year, and they were trying to like see the effectiveness of like mentorship from both like so which helps also teacher to improve year by year, because like she also has some like uh, way to see or evaluate, and also the students performance like with how it keeps on changing like year by year when they have like mentors, and also like that having a good mentor basically leads to better performance compared to the someone who is less experienced. So as per the study, if anyone has anything else to add, this was like a high level overview like that I got from the people, and they performed this sort of test. It's not a test. So anyone, yeah.
I wanted to add that the key takeaways, if no one wants to say about that, I
I,
have like
let me let
prepared some.
me let me try it out first, and then you can correct whatever I
Yeah,
missed.
no problem.
Just as an exercise for how well you actually conveyed the point, or how much all of us were paying attention to what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, the high level overview I get of this paper is that there are two things to consider. One is the impact of teachers on students and the variation in teachers on the students' career outcomes. And the second is also the actually measuring this variation on of the teachers in terms of like how much experience they've had, and in like in terms of both being a teacher and like specifically mentoring other students. um the takeaways for me from like this paper to what we are doing are that one, we are measuring economic outcomes. That is an important covariate. In our case, we decided to use travel time from home to college as like a rough measure of um I guess we could say economic impact, but then also you could use the area where they live in as like a rough measure of that again, and hand code that as like, okay, what is the level of economic or financial well-being of the student, or how much it would impact their career outcome. um the cool thing, the plots showed us, so I wanted to talk about the plots, and I think this is what you were trying to say, that when you control for a bunch of covariates, the estimates that you have become less biased, or in this case you get better estimates about like student performance improvements. um is that what you're saying, like the controlling for experience shows you that better teachers do mentor students in a better
Yeah,
manner?
yeah. That's the second equation telling us that experience matters, but the teacher experience and education matters.
Right. And then the final thing I wanted to say was more about like your presentation than the paper. So I haven't read the paper, so I don't know if they explicitly say all the students are male and all the teachers are female. But a couple of times when you and Jay also, when you use teacher, you used she, and when you use student, you used he. And there is no reason that you have to add that bias into the paper unless they already mention that. So it's like it's an example of how our inherent biases make us add unnecessary gender norms to roles. So be careful about
Yeah,
that, especially when you're presenting on a public stage. You don't want to end up being held accountable for those kinds of things. And this
yeah, of
also,
course.
like, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
And one thing I wanted to add, I may sound a bit absurd, but for the survey, we were talking like how can we measure economical background of the students. So one thing we can do is we can ask the question of which like how during the admission we have certain quotas of reservation, the minority quota or the EBC like the backward class quota. So we can ask the which quota admission are you a student of. If he is from an EBC state, he has occupied an EBC seat, then we can, of course, not of course, but I think we can place him in the economical background.
Again, try to be gender neutral when you're using terms where it could be either or any of the genders. Um,
Sorry.
it's hard. I started realizing it very recently, but it is important. Like if you don't belong to a particular gender category and someone keeps using that category, you feel alienated from like, oh, I'm never under
Yeah.
consideration, or like I couldn't be this person, and those kinds of things happen. Right. So again, going back to the plots in this on the screen, the idea of, so whenever we have like causal inference projects, there was this joke that you can always ask, add more fixed effects or add more controls. Um, to my understanding, what that means is exactly this, like adding teacher experience as a control improved your estimate. um, we don't know if it's necessarily improved or not, but we can see that intuitively it makes sense to add this as a covariate, and we get a change in the estimate, which seems to indicate the correct direction of change. Like it would be intuitive to think that a teacher who has 10 years of experience would be able to serve as a better mentor than a teacher who has 1 year of experience.
Yes.
So again, like there is also a counter argument to that, which I don't know if any of you noticed, but like if we are trying to claim that a teacher with 10 years of experience is like far removed from the kinds of experiences a student will have now, versus a teacher with maybe 2 years of experience was recently in that student's position, so they may have better like directed advice for it, so for the student. So there might be like a counter argument possible, and that is like the um, I would say the beauty of causal inference, that you can argue in multiple directions, but you have to really make your case for it. Does anyone have questions about this? We should pause and ask like what the plot is, what I'm talking about, like what is a fixed effect.
Could you zoom the plots? Like, yeah, it's a bit once.
Can you repeat again? I didn't get your voice.
Could you zoom the plots a bit?
Okay.
Yeah, zoom it down.
This is the first one. The first two are for math. These two.
So what you want to care about is just the same point on the plot below versus the plot above. And in general, you will see that the points on the plot below are higher than the points on the plot above.
Yeah, because we have added the experience controls.
So what they're saying is like if you add, there is a certain confounder that is confusing your estimate. If you add that, if you measure that variable and you add that to your regression, all of this is linear regression. You are examining the effect of one new column on the original predictions that you had. not, I shouldn't say the predictions, but the predicted teacher.
Performance measurement.
Yeah, performance measurement. Fair. So on the outcome.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, go on.
I think what all I wanted to say was fixed effect is just like adding more variables that you can control for in your regression model, such that you can say that the rest of like whatever is explained is because of the treatment. So I control for teacher experience, and then the rest of the career outcome has to be explained by mentorship. On top of that, if I had to add two more things like teachers' financial status or teachers' ability to give the student money, for example, in a hypothetical universe, then I would add those as variables, measure their values for different students, add them as a column into the regression, then measure my outcome and my predicted value. And then I could say that again, like go back and look at the pattern and how these correlate with the predictions. And then you can say, okay, see, this has like a coefficient of 0.5 versus this other column that has a coefficient of 0.1. So clearly this teacher's ability to give the student money is important for the student's career outcomes. Again, this was a hypothetical example, but I'm just trying to show you like adding fixed effects does change your estimates a lot of times. And sometimes,
So is it like, if I take it more into like random forest, so where we try to find out feature importance, or like pruning in a way. So if you remove one thing and like say, okay, what is the like effect of it on the overall outcome? So like you are trying to do that way, but it's reverse. So where like you are trying to add one feature at a time and you're trying to see what is the outcome. Then you are again adding one other thing aspect to consideration, and like again saying, okay, so like that way you're increasing your I don't know. So is it like that way, or like so like trying to find out, okay, the correlation between different things, or like is it you add one thing at a time and measure, then like basically you consider only one other thing at a time and measure.
So this is an excellent point. Like when do you start adding variables and looking at things? And this is where like science gets a bit fuzzy. So if I was a sugar company and someone was doing a study about diabetes and sugar affecting diabetes, then I would tell them maybe leave out the donuts or maybe leave out some other food item that I'm really backing to, so that like it wouldn't seem like, oh, eating donuts causes diabetes, something like that. So that's where like the line gets fuzzy, and typically you're required to pre-register your study and stuff like that. That's why we're writing this proposal to show that, look, we have a hypothesis, we haven't collected the data yet, we think this is what happens and this is exactly what we will test. We will not add more variables after this, we will not remove some variables after this. This is what we want to test and this is what we will do.
Okay, makes sense. So you are basically constraining your like feature space before like performing any experiments, and then you are saying, okay, what is the outcome based on that particular feature set that you have like.
We are pre-registering our hypothesis, and then we will test exactly that hypothesis.
Okay, but like, so why can't we add like more features? Let's say if we see that this also might be helpful to understand, okay, what is the effect? So like,
you can propose a new study and do the same procedure again, but you cannot then manipulate. Then you get into like, okay, I'm just manipulating the study in order to get the result that I want.
Okay.
So that becomes a problem because, like I said, if you're a sugar company and you want to influence these studies, then all you need to do is go and give them money and tell them that, hey, just like drop this variable or like drop that variable and let's see what effect you get, and like keep doing that until like you get this particular effect. And then once you get this effect, stop and like publish the study. So it's like, and this happens a lot of times. This has happened at the top universities. I think there was a Harvard professor who did some food-based study and something messed up, and like they had to withdraw a lot of papers. But so, I don't know if this is exactly that, but there is something called p-value hacking that I should read up on and give you an idea about. But that basically p-value hacking gets into this idea of, oh, if I have like a population and some students at Unicode are really not doing well, let's just drop those students so that overall we get a great effect for mentorship.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. You obviously
Can do that. Like there is nothing stopping us from doing that.
Yeah.
So that like, and for us, it's like a very like, ours is not a high like a high risk operation, but like these people who study the effect of smoking on cancer and sugar on diabetes and cholesterol and all of that, like that is a high impact. Like they come out with all these studies and those get published in, and news articles are written about that, so that becomes very high impact.
Yeah, that is true. Like this is mostly, I think, for particular drug-related discovery and studies, right? When you like give this drug, what is the effect and all that. Probably, I think, like where it is very sensitive. Like to take this.
And there is also, I should mention, the more variables you add, the more likely you're going to find correlations with some variable. So I forget that there was an official term for this. I should know this. But basically, you know, those sorts of experiments where they say the chocolate consumption in Sweden versus the number of Nobel laureates that it has produced over the years. Sweden consumes a lot of chocolate and it produces a lot of Nobel laureates. So does that mean eating chocolate can make you a Nobel laureate? No, that's not true. But if you keep adding variables, at some point you're going to accidentally find two variables that match. Let me look it up. Sweden. There's a website dedicated to crazy correlations. Yeah, sort of, Gaurang. So Gaurang asked the question, is the initial paper or proposal for registering the hypothesis? It's sort of like that. I also don't know like what is the formal procedure for registering the hypothesis, but my motivation to write this initial paper, at least with three or four people who were volunteering, was that we get like this format for here is how we write a paper, let's see if people accept it or not. And secondly, to add some sort of visibility to this is the kind of research we're doing. And then everyone like who has contributed joins in on like the formal paper. Once we collect the data, do the analysis and like figure out what else we want to do. So if we collect a rich enough data set, there is enough material to write multiple papers on this topic itself. Whether you compare like Unicode and non-Unicode, or Unicode versus rest of India, whether you can compare mentor quality on education. And so it depends on the kinds of data we want to collect. So yeah, I forgot to add, sorry. My second takeaway from the paper was that we need two forms. One is for the mentors, one is for the students. Students can also offer evaluations of their mentors in their form, and mentors can offer like what their experience was over the years with the students and how much time they thought they spent on mentorship and stuff like that.
The first part, I was going to suggest that part pertaining to my paper. Like after explaining my paper, I wanted to say that students can give sort of a feedback for how they felt the mentor could teach and all. I'll explain that more in my paper.
Yeah, if there are no more comments, then you can go ahead and get started with your presentation.
Just a suggestion. So whenever like you have new next presentation, just to have like 4 or 5 slides, that would be better than Google Doc. Like reading is a bit difficult here.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I haven't prepared any slides as such, but I'll just go ahead and present my paper if you want. Is the screen visible?
It is.
Okay, so I'll quickly get started. Good evening, everyone. So my paper is titled Those Who Understand Knowledge Growth in Teaching. It's by Lee S. Shellman. It's dated back in 1990, so 1986. So it's like a really old paper. But some of the points that paper highlights are really important at this stage, like this age too. So mainly before I get started, I wanted to explain two concepts, which are the SMK and PCK. So the SMK, which is subject matter knowledge, is the amount of knowledge per se in the mind of the teacher. Uh, to have full mastery of a subject, you need to go beyond the key concepts of that domain, right? So SMK requires the understanding of the structures of the subject matter. Like a teacher must be aware about why a particular theory or proposition is like correct or deemed warranted. He or she must be like thorough in their content relating to their respective subjects. Um, Taking the case of Unicode, SMK, like if we measure the SMK, like whatever the mentor knows about that particular stack, maybe it app development or web development, the mentor needs to have a clear idea of the concepts, like which frameworks work, like in which sort of project, if React may help, or which sort of project Angular may help. And like SMK measures the knowledge, content knowledge of the mentor. And going to PCK, PCK measures the ability of that mentor or teacher to effectively convey knowledge to the students. So like it emphasizes on which teaching methods the mentor uses, which is if he or she uses demonstrations, PPTs, videos, etc., or which analogies the mentor may like use to explain the student particular concept. And so it's the job of a mentor to make sure that the mentee understands the concept well. So my research paper focuses more on the mentors and their like how we can measure their PCK and SMK. So despite having high subject matter knowledge, which is the SMK, if the mentors can't convey the topic to their mentees using simple analogies, then the performance of the mentee also gets affected. Like he or she may not may not understand the concept very well. Like the mentor may have high amount of SMK, but if like the mentee does not understand any particular part of like why we are using Django, or why we are using Django forms, then it may like hinder his or her opportunity to improve. So let's go to the paper now. The paper conducted an experiment, uh, like it like the paper emphasizes on an experiment which was conducted in 1875 by the California State Board. The like that experiment was regarding measurement of the SMK of the teacher. So the following categories were considered for the experiment, which is geography, history, theory of algebra. You can see the topics here: natural philosophy, geography, oral grammar, written grammar, mental arithmetic, vocal music, penmanship, natural history, and industrial drawing, and variety of these things. So 90 to 95% of the topics which were tested, the topics tested only the subject matter knowledge, while the topics like theory of practice and teaching questioned about their teaching methods, which is like really contradictory during pertaining to this era. Like this shows that how SMK was prioritized in over PCK in the late 1800s when this experiment was conducted. And today's standards test the teacher's capacity to teach. So the teachers should and are evaluated on the following topics like management, cultural awareness, evaluation, recognition of individual differences, organization in preparing and presenting instructional plans, like which is quite obvious, because the question again, I'd like to emphasize on this point that how the teachers teach matters more than what the teachers teach. I mean, how they explain the topic well to the students, regard uh, like it's more important. So we need to evaluate that. Um, and nowadays, researchers have come up with better evaluation techniques, and their studies identify patterns of teacher behavior that improve academic performance in students. So uh, again, like some questions about pedagogical teaching is we need to ask the mentors where their explanations come from, like what material or source they have referred to. How do they deal with the problems of misunderstanding among students? Uh, and how does the mentor decide if a topic is somewhat wrongly explained in a book or a source, then how he or she will represent it to the mentees, and how will they clear out the concepts to them? So uh, obviously, like students may have preconceptions about some topics which turn out to be wrong, or like sort of a misconception. So the mentor must have a strategy which is most likely to succeed in reorganizing the understanding of learners. So the teacher involvement in research and university preparation programs is like very crucial for the development of this idea and its usefulness for improvement of science teaching. Mentors need to get involved in such research-based programs also, which like may improve their experience and may enable students, may give them encouragement to teach better and give more examples. And that pretty much sums up the paper. Like I didn't talk much about the paper, but like that experiment which was conducted early, and now how the circumstances are. Um, like I'd like to uh, emphasize, and that's the key takeaway from my paper, which is like we need to find a way to assess mentors based on how good they teach and how we may be able to improve their performance. And like mentor is the main source of teaching in Unicode, right? Like although she may give some variety of documents to for the mentees to read, but how he or she conveys that topic is really important for that student. So we need to measure the PCK knowledge of the PCK level of the mentors. So we can like create some forms on how much knowledge they know or what concepts they use while teaching. Do they use PPTs or do they use some good examples? And we can also review that from the students, that how well the mentor teaches to the students, and like we can take sort of a feedback form. So that's pretty much it. Um,
Can you tell us
Yeah.
a bit about like what survey they conducted or like who they surveyed?
Yeah, okay. So they surveyed the teachers of California high school, right? Which was uh, the teachers of the California, like there was a collection of schools from, I don't remember the countries, wait. Yeah, I have it here. Massachusetts, Michigan, Nebraska, Colorado, and California schools. And that they conducted that research in March 1875, and like they tested the teachers on various topics like which I mentioned, and some of the yeah, they tested the teachers on the SMK rather than PCK, which is again I'm we should focus less on that SMK and focus more on PCK. Also, we should focus on that integration or how the teacher understands that topic if he or she has proper knowledge of that stack, and how he or she conveys it to the student. So both SMK and PCK come into consideration. So we can like survey mentors based on that. Are there like any more questions? Feel free to add in inputs, you guys want.
I think the takeaways were summarized very well. But so this is a sample of teachers from 1875.
Exactly. And the paper was written in 1986. So the experiment is really.
I wonder what, like, I appreciate the general methodology. Like, we definitely need to understand how well the teachers are able to convey knowledge. And that's been like a big factor about education on my head. Like that's partly why, even though I used Alex Mola's slides for UMLSC, I tried to like add a couple of slides here and there that talked about normal things and then tried to convert them into machine learning stuff, like the whole cricket field and parameters and fielders kind of example, or naive Bayes spam emails and like spam words kind of example. I think that makes a tremendous difference, because if I had those things, I would have learned much better. And the reason like I understand all of these things now, maximum likelihood and stuff, is because, or I would say even now, like I find I struggle to understand some math sometimes, not very simple stuff, but I think things could be explained a lot more easily than people tend to. And that's a big part of my reason to work in education. But yeah, like if we could measure that factor, that would be very cool. So I would be interested in knowing how they measured that particularly. Or is it just like student surveys? Like how well did the teacher teach?
It's just a survey. I mean, even they were like not very keen on measuring that PCK.
Gotcha.
They haven't mentioned much about how they measured the teachers' PCK.
This also reminds me of that scene from Three Idiots movie. When
Yeah, exactly.
for the people who have seen it.
This is the zip up down thing.
No. So Amir Khan writes 2 words on the board and tells everyone to search the meaning of the words, and then he's like yeah,
says it's not a race, it's just about learning. So exactly. I mean, the way Swapnil teaches is like he uses a lot of examples and analogies, which is really good. Like many of the mentors may not use that, or even though they may have full knowledge of their stack, but they can't convey it properly.
I think it takes a lot of time. Like it's very effort intensive, and the only reason I was able to do that is because I had the rest of Smola's slides right there. Like I didn't have to do anything other than sit and come up with those examples. If I had to do everything, I would never have spent time like building these intuitive examples. So
yeah, that's
also, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just mentioning that would measuring the PCK be like would it be relevant to our example, because in Unicode, like the mentors are usually not the ones who teach the mentees, right? They just provide the resources, and when they get stuck, they help them out. So
yeah, exactly. That was the same thing I was going to say.
What about measuring the amount of domain knowledge mentors think they have, and then measure the amount of domain knowledge the mentees think the mentors had, and use that as like a confidence metric of how well the mentors know themselves and how well they think they were able to help the students? Um,
I think we can measure TCK up to a certain extent, since now we are having a learning period as well, right? When we take students in Unicode. So that is more of like similar to this sort of way, right? Basically where mentors provide resources and also help like students learn things.
Do they?
Exactly, like I'll take my example because I can't think of any. So like when they gave me a task of Django forms. So I had to learn Django forms and all that login and login authentication thing. So I was not able to understand it, but the mentor explained it so well using his experience. So which cleared out my concepts and like I now know the basics of authentication and all that. So, I mean, the mentor's push may also help a lot. So we have to consider that point, how well the mentor can explain.
Yeah, that is, but yeah, for the past, I think batches we didn't have this sort of way. So yeah, but like yeah, if we consider recent data, then definitely.
I
So
would
do
argue
the mentors now teach like Django or whatever the
So
tech stack
the
is?
idea is like mentors basically, let's say you got selected in Unicode. So basically there is this particular we take students around August, right? So August to December there's learning period, like where students, let's say, like get selected in, so they like are divided like based on the stack, they like get sort of this learning assistance from the mentors. So the idea is mentors basically assigning them like tasks or sort of the tasks that would like help them build like the foundational basic concepts that are required like for working in particular, let's say, with Django React. So mentors basically like give them tasks and resources to learn, as well as are available for like helping out them to like, if there is a like if they are stuck in all legacy. So it's kind of a learning process, but yeah. So a mentor basically guide the students and like, help.
They also conduct a lot of sessions. Like recently we had a GitHub session. So only for the Unicode students. So like we can consider that also, how well they taught us the concepts of it and GitHub and how much did they know about that. I mean, it's not just the stacks, it's the generalized sessions also. No?
Yeah, that is true. But I think like yeah, this all like the events are more like happening for newer batches. So probably like the initial batches that we had didn't had like this learning period as well as this like sessions. So for that, I think yeah, we can't consider that part. Maybe
Okay,
for I
no.
think the like first 2 years, and yeah,
But the learning period started from which batch, do you know?
it started like when we were like as a mentor. So I
Okay,
think
because
third year.
like we were going to consider data for seniors, right? So then
Yeah,
for this
but
thing,
I think like for us, the data is missing. I don't know where the data is. Like, yeah.
So even we had a learning period, like so the first batch of Unicode, but the thing was like in the learning period, what constituted as learning was you just going through the courses of the tech stack that were recommended by mentor. So there was no learning assignments or to and fro with the mentor
I
that much during the
think
learning period.
you had like during your period you had like assignments right for us, like the task. I think few tasks. I remember few tasks. Apart from that, I don't remember like a lot about it exactly.
But
But
then
yeah,
there is not much to and fro between the mentor and mentee during the
I
learning
think
period, during our times at least.
I think yeah, that was true. Like basically, I think from like ours also now it has like improved a lot. So yeah, there's like more now back and forth. And like last year, it was very structured. Like I would say learning period.
but like speaking from my personal experience, there is a lot more communication going on, but I don't think like mentors are heavily involved in teaching all the concepts. Like
Yeah,
most
yeah,
of the stuff,
yeah. they are not involved in actively teaching us it, but they are obviously therefore like guiding and providing us.
Yeah.
So like that is like their teaching definitely not much. Like obviously
They
dedicated
help
teaching
in
us.
doubt sessions and
Yeah.
like issues if we face, not teaching.
Yeah, doubts and all different things. I think teaching one is like started this year only, like where you are teaching like it and
But then, like, would measuring the PCK be important in that case? Like, substantially important because most of the teaching is done through online videos or courses.
I think
Yeah.
that
So
is true.
something similar to PCK in our case
Yeah.
would be like it was discussed in some previous discussion as well, how communicative were the mentors, how much were they available for the students and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like, so do you think so like whether the mentor like mentees are obviously applying again for mentors and like obviously continuing, so that is also one thing maybe we could consider, because that also indicates that the past mentors were good enough, so like which motivated them also to be like
Yeah.
more active and like now contribute. So I think that like it's not exactly PCK, but it's something similar to PCK, like where we have our own factors. And yeah, so Devang and Shreya, could you also add like your like the notes that you had like on Google Doc in the Notion page?
Yeah, the key takeaways column.
Yeah, whatever you like
Done,
said
done.
about, yeah, both of you like, so yeah.
Yeah,
It
even
would
I
be
will do
helpful.
that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we should get to the paper if the discussion is completed. Sweden chocolate. What was the website? Random correlations. I think this is the page. Yep. So this is what I was talking about. Like the more covariates you add, the more likely you're going to find a pattern such that that covariate really matters, is like seems really predictive of the other of the outcome. And the reason for that is, and this is like the more random covariates you add, in the sense like you don't actually think about things, but like you're just like, oh, more data, let's just keep adding. It's a different story when you actually think about something, you think it makes sense and it actually turns out to make sense. So this is like random stuff. This is, for example, US spending on science, space, and technology, and the correlation with suicides by hanging, strangulation, and suffocation, which I shouldn't be laughing at. But the entire website is a demonstration of the fact that the more like random data are very correlated in life. Number of people who drowned by falling into a pool versus films Nicolas Cage appeared in. Apparently, the correlation is 66.6%. The US spending and suicides are correlated 99.79%. So does that mean if you spend more on science, space, and technology that people tend to commit more suicide? I don't think that's the case. But yeah. Cool. Anyway, the website is Spurious Correlations by Tyler Wiggin. Going back to what you were talking about. Go to overleaf. I think this was the one. This was it.
Yeah.
We should rename this. So this is basically an exercise in how to write a paper because we have never written a paper and we need to try. So generally the sections are organized into an abstract, which is a brief description of your paper, hypothesis, result, and experiments. Not experiments necessarily, but like paper, research question, and the abstract basically tells you about what research question you're asking, what are the answers you got, and why is this part special? Why is this different from some of the literature? Like what is different in your paper? Then the introduction is basically like an expansion of the abstract, but mainly focusing on what has been done and why. What is your question and like why is it important? Then you explicitly get to the research questions, which is like mainly this question that we're trying to answer. Can non-expert mentors also have a positive impact on student career outcomes? Proposed methodology we'll expand on, which discusses the whole average treatment effect and difference in differences approach. Participants describes who we are actually studying and why these people matter. Data collection talks about what sorts of covariates we're trying to collect, why we are collecting these covariates, and how we hope that this will, like the broad themes for this data. So some of the data is about the people, some of the data is about the mentorship, some of the data is about the outcomes. The applications highlight, and we should rename this section. I feel like applications is a bit weird of a name. Like, again, when I say weird, I mean, I don't read this in the literature. Like applications is not something that people write about, but maybe something like proposed benefits or like some, I don't know. I'll check out some other papers to see like how they write.
Case, something like case study or something.
Maybe case studies, maybe. And finally, the conclusion, or at least like what we think this will highlight, or impact, I should write, because we don't actually have the, yeah, I should write impact. So this is like a proposal style of writing because we still haven't conducted any of the experiments. So this will talk about like, here is what we propose to do and here is why it is important. And if we manage to do what we are proposing, then here is what it will tell us. The reason I wanted to do this is just because like when you write papers, like I think the closest paper to publication is probably Joe and Jagrut's project, because they're already mostly done with it. Like the Twitter bots project, if you care about publishing it, then you would want to like the approach you would want to have is first conduct a literature review to see what other papers there are about injury detection. Then you would want to figure out the general sort of paper structure that they have. And the only reason you want to follow the same structure is because it's easier to get accepted if you're already like following some sort of precedent. Yeah, I've seen that happen to one of my papers in the past where like the major feedback they had was this paper is not structured well. And fair enough, it had a very arbitrarily chosen structure, but what they just wanted me to do was follow the structure the other papers have followed, just because it's evolved over time and it's cleared. It's easier for people to read because they know what structure to expect. I don't think I want to say anything else about this. You should definitely go through this, because the longer paper that we will write with all of the people involved in this group will be of the same structure, but with a lot of experiments and a lot of discussion about these experiments and why they matter. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say for now. Are there any questions?
I just wanted to share one thing.
Mhm.
So I was going through the AI for all website,
Mhm.
and I found that they already have a like method to measure the success outcomes of their students, and they also have surveys designed. So I will share the link. They have not released the surveys there, but I think we can ask for them or something.
That would be very useful. Yeah.
So here, if you scroll down on this page,
Mm-hmm.
towards the end, they have a sort of framework, like how they measure the outcome.
Immediate impact, turning point impact, and long-term impact.
Yeah.
So immediate impact is more psychological. Okay, this is psychological. This is development of technical skills. So this is measurable on a rating scale. Confidence is again like psychological. Turning point impact is slightly more long-term, like grad school. This is measurable. Internships are very measurable. Long-term impact, we can actually check if their jobs are in AI and related fields. We can check if they continue to work in AI post Unicode, or because Unicode is more software development, then we should look at that. Makes sense. This is super useful. Thank you. I think that's all I wanted to say. Do we have anything else on the agenda for today?
I think that's all for today.
So once we have this paper, I'll also send it across to a couple of people for some feedback about like, okay, this is our proposal. What do you think this is reasonable? Do you think we should do more, etc. And then we can get into designing the surveys. So we should definitely reach out to AI for all and ask about the surveys. I can do that. For the to-dos for next time, I think one of them is Jez presenting a different project idea.
Yeah, that is a paper. Yeah, it's about knowledge bases, having it like into the language model as another way to like use the external knowledge and like generate better reasoning.
Okay.
Yeah, the paper was really good. Like so, yeah, I thought maybe
Are you presenting that in the context of like, here is something that that is doable by Unicode research, or just like here
I like my idea is a bit different. Like, but yeah, the paper is different from what idea I had. So the idea that I had is like, if we suppose if you see BERT, right? So BERT has this sort of a closed class, right, where you have sentence A and sentence B, and you try to like basically like have two objectives. So where you try to predict okay whether sentence B is a follow-up of sentence A or not, and also like basically the mask word. So I was thinking of using that approach probably for like sarcasm detection or like natural language inference. So the idea is you have like the sarcastic text and also you have like actual text in simple English meaning conveying the same meaning as sarcastic text. So having this both like consecutively, you are enforcing your model to learn like the semantics as similar to the text explaining simple English language. And you use this and like when you perform sort of like you use for the downstream task, you just now use like the first part, like the sentence one, where like it should encode the same meaning. So that was the idea. And in this case, like you can think like, so we can encode like sarcastic text as like along with the normal text as well. So normal text and the same meaning in the simple English, same like. So we are basically also enforcing your like language model to like not lose on the ability that it had like during the pre-training. So that was the idea. I need to do a bit more about literature.
So I'm thinking about like if this could build on top of the framework that these folks already had. I think Shehan is on call with us.
Which, sorry.
So we had a team working on sarcasm detection. So I'll ask Shrey to unmute and maybe talk to us about like, is this relevant? Do you think this could like add on top of what you already built?
Hi. Can you kind of repeat before? I'm sorry, I was on the train.
No problem. I think so. Jay is proposing a particular idea, and you can take this offline and discuss this with him, and you can come back and like explain next week if this can already build on top of your existing work. Again, the intention being like, don't reinvent the wheel. If you have something, then add on top of that and write a paper about it. Like our goal is right now to start by writing papers with the intention that papers are what get you into grad school, and papers are currently what is most important on your plate that you can get out of this research effort.
Like the problem is there is no existing data set for this approach. So if we like decide to go about, then we'll have to construct data set.
So
And like that,
sarcasm data set.
no, but like if you have like the sarcastic text and also the same text like conveying the same meaning into simple English, right? So it's just difficult to have. There is no asset data, right? Having parallel like sentences conveying the
I
same.
see. You want to have a sarcastic statement and then encode the same statement in plain English.
Yeah, and you use this task and like, so the idea is when you perform this like training, so you're enforcing a model to like learn the embeddings, like so such that like let's say the sarcastic text also is there, it's a bit difficult to understand, and you have the same text encoded in plain English. So you are enforcing your embeddings to be very similar, like both embeddings.
And you're saying this will help you how with sarcasm? Isn't this the goal of sarcasm detection? Like,
So like the idea is if you use this way, right, for now like the training, so then basically let's say when you are using your model in inference time, you just have like the sarcastic text, right? So having the sarcastic text now, like when it will be trying to encode this like meaning semantic very similar to as it was encoded in plain English. So you're now probably you might perform better like in terms of understanding the language more, right? Things that are more sarcastic. And this is more of like a fine tuning sort of using transfer learning and the capabilities of this large language models and like performing some few shot learning like, about it to see if it improves on. So that was the idea.
So are you saying like kind of translating back, you know, why it is not what it meant? Is it something which we're trying to understand?
So sorry, can you repeat once again?
Oh, I was saying was, so you were saying, okay, there's a sarcastic sentence or whatever, like some sort of text form, but what you're trying to implement, I think, was kind of translating back to why it means is it has a different sort of meaning. Like, you know, maybe whatever it says is like kind of positive sound, but at the same time, whoever knowing the context wise, they might think that's not really positive. That might be something exaggerating or like negative. So you're kind of like trying to dig into the understanding on that sentence.
Yeah, trying to understand and use it further like for downstream tasks, right? And like this, if we are able to understand like encode the same meaning, right, as like let's say for sarcastic text as it was, let's say if encoded in English, plain English, then probably we are getting a bit better at understanding language a bit more, like the actual semantics, like so which might like help us do better on like natural language understanding. So that is the idea, probably. I still don't know how effective it might be, but yeah, this is like a rough hypothesis that I have.
I'm thinking two things. One is like, you know, like where is the usage of like sarcasm, which I haven't actually figured out. Probably need to read more papers, you know, like
so
how
like
is it
if you see like sarcastic text, right, so the idea is it can be used anywhere, right, where like let's say if you do better on sarcasm detection, right, so then your model has like at least learned some capabilities of understanding the natural language, right? So then the ideal way to test, okay, and it can be used like anywhere into the system, right? Because sarcastic text can occur like related to any textual data related systems, right? And like the idea is, okay, you learn this thing, train it, and like see, okay, how well it performs on natural language, understanding benchmarks that are there. So if it like actually is learning to encode the meaning like of the sarcastic text as suppose it was in like encoded in the plain English, then like it would also do better on this natural language understanding task too. So that was the idea behind it. Especially, yeah.
So when you say you want to bring a normalized text and the sarcastic text, make both of them as similar as possible, you mean the sentence level embedding that encodes the sentence?
Yeah. So like when you are training, right, in BERT and all different architectures, let's say that you are like have like mass language models. So like the idea is to learn sort of this the like embedding space, right? So in this
For
case,
word
having like,
level, for token level, but
yeah,
here when
token, yeah. So here the idea is to have the sentence level embeddings, right? Basically, and you learn like this thing, and you enforce like your embeddings to be like very close. Sort of you can think about it as like a KL divergence. So you're trying to minimize
for
the
for
difference
both
between
the
the
sentences, right?
yeah sentences, the embedding semantics.
Okay, and then for the downstream tasks, we'll be working with those sentence embeddings for our predictions.
Yeah, yeah. So like for downstream tasks, we'll just use like the embedding structure that we have for like the sarcastic text one. We'll like not consider the like same text that was like let's say as if it was encoded into the plain English. So now we for fine tune like for the pre-training part we use that like setup for the training the model further, and now we like just drop the second like sentence that was encoded into plain English, and we just now use the sarcastic text. And the idea is if let's say if we are able to do at least some things better on like NLU benchmark something like that, so probably then we can say that if we try to use this model, let's say at some places, and it might tend to perform better. But the idea is also in the same hand, like so as you're training this model, let's say, so when you are trying to predict okay, say a sarcastic one, so the other idea is it should not also like deteriorate the performance on let's say the existing task that it was like the pre-training ability. So then in that case, like the other option I had like a solution was you have like a mix of both. So like there is a sarcastic text and also the normal text that is there. And like you encode both of them like as it is. Suppose like the sarcastic text would be encoded into the plain English, but the normal text would be the same normal text follow. So the idea is you are trying to basically also see whether like language model is like you're trying to also like preserve the same ability of the language model as it was previously, but also trying to like basically push its embedding space to understand more about the sarcastic text too. So something like that.
So we are got. So we are not converting one text to other, but we are just like gathering the embeddings and making them as close as possible.
Yeah, we are leveraging like the sentences that we have, let's say in plain encoded English, and like enforcing that to like learn the actual semantics.
Yeah, I think now, yeah, I think that was it.
So that is the idea on a higher level. I still have to do a bit more about the literature, like okay, what else like is existing in this particular space, but like yeah, data set is not there like as typically for like this, like where you have sarcastic text and also like the same text encoded into the plain English.
Yeah, like mapping text, right? Like data set mapping.
Yeah.
Have to look into it.
I actually found a paper which is actually pitching the same idea as Jez. So they collected, that is what I feel. I'm just posting a link of the paper in the chat box. So I feel what they have done is they've done a survey and they've collected a bunch of tweets from like responses from people, precisely 4, and then one, they have divided into a couple of categories like sarcastic, non-sarcastic, and then they have also created categories of sarcasm like sarcasm, irony, satire, understatement, overstatement, and a rhetorical question. And on page number 6, they have this, column where they have the category, the tweet text, the explanation of the tweet text, and how it is rephrased. So I think that is what Jay was pitching.
No, like idea is not to like rephrase it. The idea is you use like capture the semantic level and like use it for further data.
So
but yeah, I think
what I'm So what I'm saying is, if you have the data set which is having the rephrased sarcastic tweets, then it would be easier to do your analysis. Like the current hitch was the data set, I feel.
Let me see the examples.
And I also feel the same way that the hyperparameter tuning of the models, like the NLP models, would be really helpful if we have the rephrased text. And the results, I also hope that the results will be much better than just directly outright checking out sarcasm tweets, manually labeling them, and then trying to detect on the test data set. I feel
We
if you're
don't have
just
to
having the
label the
rephrased,
text as well. We are not like doing any sarcasm detection.
you're just trying to fine tune the model so that it is able to detect sarcasm in a text or not, right?
No, it is like basically. So the idea is by using this sort of approach, you can probably do better on natural language understanding in general. So where basically if you like, let's say, do better about understanding what the sarcastic text is actually trying to say, rather than like trying to predict what the category and whether this text is sarcastic or not. Right?
So
Like basically what
basically,
kind of
you
sarcasm it
create
is.
a model, fine tune it so that it is better to detect sarcasm, and then you just post it so that it will be. Then you check the model's accuracy on other NLP related tasks and understand if it is performing better than it initially was after training on this
Other,
and fine tuning on the
it's
sarcasm.
just NLU task, natural language inference and understanding task. So where it actually requires to understand your text right better. And probably the idea is if you like understand text better, let's say, so then when it's like basically, let's say, you have to generate also something on the go, right? So if there is some sarcastic sentence before, then it should like be able to pick up that and like write something good out of it and get you later on part. So you are generally exploiting your natural models like ability that is there, and the task that was designed like let's say for the training bot and all different things, and you are using that too. And like we're trying to like constrain both of the embedding space. So it's more about learning these embeddings and which can be useful further for like the task.
So it's after knowing that the sentence is sarcastic and then just understanding more on that matter and then using applying kind of
The idea is if the text is sarcastic, it shouldn't require anything to know whether it is sarcastic or not. It should like typically encode the same meaning as it was in the plain English, like right. So when like basically like as we humans do, right? We also like learn from a lot of experiences, but yeah. Probably I think this paper might be helpful. I will have to read a bit about this.
Yeah, so what we can do in such cases is like we can just like I think there might be papers who are normalizing the text, and if we find such papers, then we can use the model predictions and then just like while creating the data set, we can just change the wrong ones or something like that.
Something like that. Because in this case, we also need like a bit of like sentences that are not like let's say sarcastic at all. Because we don't want to like see just to better on this part. We also want to like basically preserve the language modeling ability that we had previously as well. So yeah, it is a mix of both, like so sarcastic text and also like the normal text that we see. Like the data set is bunch of like mix of both. Examples.
So I think we're going to have a good discussion next week.
Yeah, probably because like the idea was if we like let's say tend to collect data and create a data set like specifically for this, then probably we might require a bit of expertise like or someone at least on board who deals with this kind of like area. So because data set creation, like it's a bit it requires a bit expertise and we need to like carefully create data. So otherwise like that skewing factors and all biases also like that tends to like dictate much of the stuff. So like that was the idea. So like I will see once. Yeah, but like I think this could be used if they have like release data set.
Okay. So I think what I was going to say is for the rest of the people, I think you should start looking up sample surveys that we want to design. In the sense, and I think I mentioned this before, the set of questions we want to add to the surveys. And if we have already pre-existing surveys that are open source, like in the sense that we can get access to them. For instance, like Josh mentioned, if AI for all is measuring some sort of impact, then we could ask them to see if they're willing to share some questions or some of the surveys that they take. Or if there are standardized feedback surveys that we can modify. And by standardized, I mean like with some sort of research backing them, not just like surveys that people have made. Those are also important, but like if you can cite a paper and explain the rationale for a survey, it's much better than just arbitrarily picking up a survey. So I think that's the task for next week, and then after Jay goes, depending on how much time the presentation is, I can possibly present my own work, and the week after that, I'll invite Johan to come and talk to us about information tracing.
Okay. And so you were mentioning that like whatever coverates we will like mention right now, we'll have to stick with that, right? So in this like the paper that we had, so we have just broadly categorized like the categories and the areas we'll be targeting and collecting coverates from there.
Well,
For
we aren't held to it, to be clear. Like just because we published a paper saying this doesn't mean that we have to stick to that. But what I'm saying is what you decide before your study doesn't change during the study.
Mhm. Yeah, so I was just like making sure that like it's fine, right? Basically for now, or like basically should we like add the other things to write in the paper since the deadline has been extended?
I mean, two things that came out of today's presentation. One is like measuring the financial outcomes, financial status of the student and their families, because that typically does affect or the economic status, whatever you want to call that.
Yeah, I think that is covered in the paper. I think home and personal like life elements such as parents' background, financial background, and proximity to college.
Gotcha. And the second thing is that we would probably also want to survey the teachers to examine like their experiences and like their self-rated self-evaluation of the PKC. No, not the PKC.
PCK.
That subject
matter. So like basically your, if I get it correct, then is it like will like just like send the feedback to the mentors of the same group that we are collecting the data of the mentees, and like mentors will have to rate like their mentees, right? Or like mentors will rate their own capabilities as well.
Yes.
So both, right?
Yes, to both. Yes.
Okay. And sorry, like this was just a doubt. So I wanted to ask, so like when you write, let's say, talk about this proposed methodology for like this particular paper, let's say you write. So in that case, like when you talk about okay differences and differences, so do you explain differences and difference completely, or like from this particular like respect how it is going to be? So like let's say we will have like this confound or something, and like we'll try to this like make some assumptions and like may like due to which now we'll have like a weaker confoundedness, and like now we can take this average statement effectively. So like do you explain difference and difference as general like what the procedure is, or like basically for with respect to this particular study?
I think that both, right? Because you have to motivate, like I don't think you have to spend a lot of time explaining what difference and differences is, but I think you have to define it. Like this is the method, and here are the things we plug in for our estimate of this, applying this method to our data set.
Okay. Okay, sounds good.
But no, we don't spend a lot of time on explaining what difference and differences is. I just wanted to add a couple of equations there to equations are easy, like everyone gets them. So.
Yeah. Okay. And should we also mention that, like, let's say there were a few confounders to write basically, so like someone would have work experience, someone would not have, like before applying that. So and that is also work experience. We also consider it as like a covariate to write rate around to measure the outcome to.
Yeah.
So should we add like this specifically that this are also like the confounders too, like for our study?
So in the limitations, we should definitely add a couple of sentences about how opportunity is inequitably distributed. we are already examining a subset that has less opportunity than the average IIT graduate or like from elite university. Like we should also define what we mean by tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 universities based on the website of like, I'm assuming Mumbai University, like DJ Sangvi is officially a tier 1 or tier 2 university. So I just want to get like link to the site that explains that.
Is it tier 1? Because we are under the impression it's tier 3.
Or maybe tier 3, I'm not sure.
Explain like the difference between tier 1, tier 2 and tier 3 if it exists.
You should look that up.
Because the rankings and like the things that college says are very specific to regions, not just like on a country level.
Nice. Get linked back to my same blog post. Yeah, I don't know where this is, but we should definitely check it out. And also where's this blog post? Cool. Okay, so basically formalizing definitions. I think this is all for today.
Yeah. No. So like you go through the paper and like let us know if we need to add anything. So we can add.
Sounds good.
Like for the sections that we are adding.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So we have already up to 4 pages. Yeah. Never expected like. Okay.